Every week we do a Q&A with interesting and accomplished members of the adaptive community to find how they persevered, how they innovated, how they built communities, and how they found solutions. Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast. Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast. Today we are talking with Marko Cheseto, who is a college American before losing his feet. We'll get to the losing the feet part. He just ran Boston in 2:37, but he is a 2:35 marathoner. For those of you who know what a marathon is, what marathon times is, he was 72nd, I think, in the New York City Marathon when he went 2:35. So this is on two prosthetic legs. He is a technician for Prosthetic and Orthotic Associates. And when he lost his legs, we're going to get into this story. He was running in Alaska. He had a cousin who had joined him, a cousin who ended up committing suicide. And Marko went out for a run, sort of distraught, and ended up in the snow for at least 56 hours and found his way back into a hotel. And just an absolutely amazing story, an amazing guy. I met Marko kind of in Boston. Across the room, and I'm getting to meet him now. So I'm excited. Marko, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Chris, for having me.
This is great. So Boston, what was Boston like for you? Because Boston is your only true time, right? Because they have a para class at Boston. So even though you ran 2:35 in New York, Boston is the one that really makes it into the record books. Is that right?
I would think that's right. So I don't want to be quoted with this, but I think that would be the recorded time that I have run as a bilateral amputee.
By a bilateral amputee. So can you explain to us what a bilateral amputee is and what this looks like?
In a layman language, this is someone missing both feet. It can either be above knee, that is how they explain it, or below a knee. So for my case, I am a bilateral BK, below knee amputee. So it's just a guy running without feet.
So you lost your feet, but then you gained effectively like cheetah legs on your lower legs. How does this work?
You know, this is just a device that they try to mimic your biological feet. Right. It's not close to a biological foot, but, close enough that I'm able to run a 2:35.
Exactly. Well, we were talking about that earlier because you were an All-American in college. You're a 5K and 10K runner, but you also ran a 1 half marathon and did a 1:09 half marathon. So, I mean, like, without really training for a half marathon, you were a legit half marathoner, which is not a huge step to go up to the marathon from the half marathon. What is the difference for you? Because I know that people talk about that, right? And some of these people have issues saying, because you were doing one race and they said, well, if you win the race, we're not going to give you credit for winning the race because you're an amputee. What do you say to the people about the idea of you have an advantage versus you don't have an advantage? And my comment about the cheetah legs, I thought that was actually sort of the trademark name of the prosthetic legs.
Chris, I have two feelings when I hear that statement, that you are running with an advantage. One, it makes me feel sad. But then at the same time, it makes me feel happy that I live in a society whereby a majority of people who have their biological feet would think someone like myself is having an advantage. You know what I think sometimes, but I don't tell people when they ask me that? Part of me wants to ask them, so are you going to schedule an appointment with your orthopedic surgeon so you can join me and have the advantage I'm having? But, I have asked that actually some people, but then, they start shaking their head going, no. So I think since we run on a mechanical thing attached to ourselves, I think Usually because, mechanization, we are not living in an early man life. So I think there is this thing about mechanization, industrial revolution, that people think anything that is not a human part must have an advantage because it doesn't get tired. It's like running on an engine, except the engine that pushes these running prosthetics in this case is myself.
Exactly. Now, what's the coordination like? Because when you lost your legs, you had to learn how to walk again. And I saw you walking with a walker, and you have your walking legs then, right? And your stumps are all new, and it's probably a big challenge, just a painful situation getting the stumps to heal so that you can actually put the prosthetics on, so that you can walk, so you can bear weight. But then you go from learning how to walk to then learning how to run. And what's the coordination like that? Like how hard is it for you to run, and how conscious? Because also obviously you don't feel your foot hitting the ground, do you? I mean, you feel it through your leg, but it's got to be a little bit different.
It's very challenging, particularly for someone like myself who had walked on biological feet for 28 years. And then all of a sudden I had to learn walking on a prosthetic. There's always that disconnect. I always feel like I am not connected to my feet, my artificial feet, because below my knee, there's nothing I can do. I cannot control like, oh, maybe I need to move it left, right. Or, no, I have to move my whole foot, like using like my upper part of my leg, like my thigh and all that, to just lift it from the ground and move it. And even when I'm driving, I don't just move my angle just to like switch from like gas to brake. I have to like lift it and like move the whole foot around. So yes, there's a lot of coordination, a lot of balance. And remember, we're using the lower back to be upright. For you to be in that erected standing position, you have to like engage your lower back and your hips to just try and push them. So there's that aspect too, whereby I'm constantly using my lower back and my hips, pushing it in so that I am upright. And then the biggest disadvantage, particularly on the running foot, is the contact part to the ground is very minimal. So even if I step on a grain, something very, very tiny, like a tiny rock, oh yeah, that is a recipe for falling down really hard. And I don't know if you can see it, but if you see like right here, I feel like just a few weeks before Boston, I was running and like really going good. And all of a sudden, like, I don't even know what happened. I just had that, I felt like I stepped on something and there was nothing I could do, just went down. So there's that aspect. And you can even see that from like when I'm on a standing position. For example, after the Boston Marathon, trying to talk to a journalist,
Right.
like I have to just bounce around because I cannot balance just standing. Imagine now, like I have to be thinking about that the entire time I am running. And, Earth, the road, it's not flat. It's not even. So that entire time I am running, I have to switch based on how my blade is pushing me. And you have to remember, particularly Boston, people drive, they have in the winter, they sometimes have sand, they have salt to melt the roads or whatever they use. So there are parts of that road that is like sunken more than the other parts, because that is where tires are constantly hitting people, because people follow where another car is being driving over to make sure that they are not going off the road. So as I'm running, like I'm in my rhythm, and then all of a sudden I feel like, no, my left foot is on a higher ground than my right. So I try to switch, but there's not a lot of like space like that tire line. Then and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now my right is higher than my left. So I keep like switching and trying to find that comfortable place. And then all of a sudden I find like, okay, this is good. So then I'm running, and then as soon as I'm like, okay, I am in my rhythm, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, there is a hole on the road. There is a railway crossing. There is something else. So there's that. So it is a lot of work. It's a lot of brain work. And as much, when I am running, I'm trying to minimize thinking about stuff to conserve my energy to only running. But there's like every second, split second decisions to be made as I run on prosthetics. But, I'm making it do the work.
It's interesting that you say that, because then you're in conscious thought as you're running, which usually I think of running, especially when you get in really good shape and you kind of go for like your long run. It's sort of like the opposite of like REM sleep kind of thing, where REM sleep, like your body is at rest, but your mind is active. But when you're in really good shape and you go for a long run, it's like your body is active and you can kind of turn your mind off. That there are times that you're running along and all of a sudden you've reached some point in your run and you don't even remember how you got there. But you're in exactly opposite, where you're in conscious thought, which I had read an article at one point about these guys. And I think it was like British military, and these guys were training and they were doing stuff on a treadmill, but they were making them do math problems while they were working on the treadmill, which then when they weren't on the treadmill made their perceived effort seem that much lower when they were just running. But you don't have the luxury of going through that situation. How much worse is it when you get tired? Because then your mind is tired too.
And that is the time you start realizing, of course, I don't take them off to dry them. I am tired. I have a liter of like sweat trapped in my liner, and I feel like the foot is almost slipping off, and I'm tired. My body is telling me, why are we doing this? Is it about time to like stop? So there's so many variables that I have to try and control at the same time. Yes, so it gets like worse as I progress towards like the finish, because
the end of the marathon is that much.
Oh yeah, of course, yes. And like at that time, I still get like muscle cramp at some point if I just like try to, particularly when I'm like going uphill or going downhill, I'm trying to engage my muscles differently, like fire up a muscle to climb. And that because remember, I am like, the prosthetic is pressing up my body part that was not supposed to have something press it.
Right.
So it's a wrong place. Something like that is not a part that I was supposed to be using to hold my body weight. And now as I try to engage and fire my muscles to like push myself up a hill, then it gets so challenging, because as I fire my muscle, it expands. But then as it expands, the prosthetic restricts that expansion, because it's like, and I have a sleeve too that hold my prosthetic to my leg. So, and I have to use a newer sleeve to make sure that the air doesn't leak, because I am using suction. Right. So it doesn't give me a lot of room to expand, like when I'm doing my practice, because, I can use an older sleeve that I don't care. If it has a hole, I can stop and check and maybe turn around and be like, okay, maybe I can change. But during a run, like a competition, like running a marathon, Boston Marathon, New York, Chicago, I have to make sure that what I am using is something that can hold me until I finish. So there is a lot of those small things that it's not physical, but it's there with me all the time as I am running. Like even when I try to zone off, my prosthetic will remind me, hey, you need to do something. Something is about to fall off, or there's too much sweat right now. Your stump is moving around inside your prosthetic, or inside your socket, I mean.
Right. So there's never anything, it's never easy for you. Though I think a lot of people would look at your times and say, well, it must be relatively easy for him because those are some really, really fast times. When you got your running legs, so you got your first running legs through the Challenge Athletes Foundation, how did that end up coming about?
So, when I lost my feet, it made the news globally. And ESPN did a piece with me, 15 minutes clip that, caught attention of Össur, the prosthetic company based in Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the rep contacted a prosthetic clinic in Anchorage, Alaska, the Northern Light Orthopedic or Prosthetic Clinic, who, through their representative, they came to the hospital. Of course, they knew my story, good runner. And they told me there's this non-profit Challenged Athlete Foundation that supports amputees like yourself if you want to run again. And I'm like, is that a question or what are you saying? Of course I want to run again. So then they guided me on how to apply, and I applied for a grant to get running fit. And I got my 2 flex runs in, I think I would say February, maybe March of 2013.
People don't understand like all of what goes into these things. I mean, they are high tech as you can get. How much does a running leg go for? Like, I mean, obviously there are variations within, but ballpark kind of figure.
When you get like the cheapest prosthetic clinic that will just help you at like their cheapest, one goes for, the lowest can be 7,000. That is just one, but that is just to get the socket made. So you can now put like the running blade, because there is a difference between the socket and the actual running blade. Those are 2 different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And insurance don't cover it because they think they say that it's luxury.
Right. Though for you, not being able to run or running is not a luxury, right? I mean, running is a way of life.
If I wasn't running today, I think my insurance company would be spending so much money on me today on like maybe heart issue medication, I would be like maybe 200 and something, 300 pounds, just doing nothing, if I was not running. So by me running, it's actually made my life cheaper, even to my insurance company, because now they are not taking care of a guy who has like lifestyle issues with, diseases like lifestyle diseases, obesity, high blood pressure, and all that, cholesterol, higher cholesterol.
No, you're a healthy guy, right?
So if you're bilateral like myself, you're looking at, up to 30,000 to get your running feet.
Wow. And what did that feel like? I mean, just because you'd done the walking part and then you got into the running, because they asked you if you wanted to run and you said yes, but did you really believe that it could happen, or what was it like that first time getting to run?
If it were not for the 21st century technology, videos and all that, I don't think I would have believed that. But my amputation happened in 2011, and 2012 was the London Olympics and Paralympics. And then the infamous South African Oscar Pistorius was doing really well. So a lot of people who came to my hospital to visit me would show me videos of guys running in the Paralympics and say, hey, look, these guys are killing it out there. There's no reason you can't, particularly someone like you who already is a runner. So that helped me. And I was able to even watch, like, Regis Woods running, and he's above knee. And I'm going, if this guy can run and he doesn't even have his knee, I think I'm able to. So I think I was able to believe that I would be able to run because I was able to physically see videos of people looking like myself running. But I don't think I would have just believed myself just from just being there and thinking about my ability at that time as a newly amputated guy. I don't think I would have had that. And as I tried to think, how would that have made me believe? Like, it's hard to know if I was motivated because I just saw that and I was like, no, I can't. Like, look at these guys, they're doing it. There's no reason I cannot do this.
Right. And you started as a sprinter, right? Because as a Paralympic athlete, there's no marathon for your class.
For my class, the longest is 400. So I started sprinting.
To go from a 5K, 10K guy to doing a 400 as your short or as your longest race, what was that like?
It was different.
Yeah.
It was very different. And the other thing that I used to think running in college, I used to think that the sprinters were not doing as much work as the long distance runners until I became a sprinter myself. And I'm like, man, it just requires as much effort as long distance. So I was able to try that. And, I was running good. My recorded 200, I think, is like 23 seconds.
Okay. That's fast.
Fast enough. Yeah. And my recorded 400, I think, was around 50 seconds.
Okay.
So I was not a sprinter. I was like this new self-made sprinter.
So that's kind of interesting.
That looked like I was a sprinter that looked like a distance guy.
Well, it's interesting that your second 200 was actually slower than your first 200.
That tells you what my body knows how to do better. Long stuff.
Get in there and just start turning. So when you found the marathon, you thought, okay, this is who I am. Let's take a step back because you left Kenya to go to Alaska. We've heard so many stories about running in Kenya. Are the stories that we've heard, are those legend? Are those real, that you have to run to school every day and run back, that you have to run to the store? I remember reading some story about a marathoner who had won a big race, New York or Boston or something, and ran home and nobody picked him up at the airport. And so he put his bag on his back and ran home. Are those stories, is that really as much a part of the culture of Kenya as we've come to believe?
It is, because I remember the first time that I rode in a car was 1998. And I'm
How old were you?
I'm born 83. So 83 to 1998. That's like what, 15 almost, maybe?
Yeah, 15 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can imagine that. Like, that was my first time. And as soon as I sat in that car, walking to school, trees were stationary. They were not moving. As soon as I was in a car, trees in my neighborhood started moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a very strange feeling. So yeah, so there's a lot of walking and going to school on bare feet, running, and it's not even like flat that you're like, oh, particularly where I grew up. I went home to Kenya in 2020 with my family. And like what I call a road, like, oh, this is our road. My wife was like, this to me is what we call a hiking trail in America, isn't there? But that was the road that we were using. Even like as we talk, there are some places that the road network is not even there. Even kids going to the elementary school that I went to, there's no bus. Like in my neighborhood, in my village, nobody owns a private car.
Right.
We use public vehicles, and it's only one, like that, you know.
Only one public vehicle. And so did you walk? Did you run? How were the how I mean, because it's not scientific, it's not like you're training, but
No,
you're setting this like endurance kind of baseline, right? This foundation.
yes, and you have to remember too, it was not only, we were doing like what a professional athlete does, going to the gym, doing weights and all that. We finish school, you come home, you go get water from a river, you're carrying like a container, well, maybe 50 pounds maybe of water. So that is your weight training. You go and cut some firewood. So those are your kettlebell, you know, you swinging, you cutting, you go to a farm, you plowing. So that still you're throwing things, you know, it was still like, now that I'm like, when I look back, what I'm doing now and what I did in Kenya without doing it, thinking I was doing it to be strong, it's almost the same thing I'm doing now, except that I know I have to do this now to get strong. But I'm not as strong as I used to do in Kenya, because I remember growing up, we would throw rocks, like say, let's see who can throw a rock the farthest. Now I am playing with my dog, throwing a tennis ball, and then I come home, I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to go to a massage therapist tomorrow because I've been throwing too much ball. So yeah, so the lifestyle is what has set those long distance runners from East Africa, you know, Ethiopia, Kenya, for that endurance. And you can think of it this way: someone who has been doing something in a very unstructured way, no structure at all, but it was still very beneficial. And then now they get a coach and they get the science of training. Think of what that can do to them. Yeah. And being told that, you know, this is how you can even conserve the energy as you're running. So there's that aspect too. And then that diet, you know, they are eating real food. You know, the first time I landed in Alaska, no, like, you know, the college was open, and, you know, I asked my coach then, hey, where can I get lunch? And he's like, oh, there's Subway downstairs on the sports complex where we were. I said, oh, okay. And then I said, what is that again? He said, Subway. I said, okay, perfect. So I was like, Subway. I'm going like downstairs, going Subway. I get to Subway. I say, hey, I want Subway. And this lady who was at Subway said like so many things that I don't know what she said. But I didn't want to lose my thought about what I wanted. I didn't want to lose the food that the coach had said, you like it, Subway. So after she was done, I never listened what she was saying because I didn't want to lose my thought. I said, no. I don't want all that. I just want Subway. Because when we order food in Kenya, you say you want ugali and beef, or ugali and this thing, and that's it. There's no 15,000 options for just a lunch. Or if you want breakfast, you're like, hey, can I get breakfast and eggs? And then it's like, oh, so how do you want your eggs cooked? What? There's a way of cooking eggs? Okay, whatever. What do you mean? Do you want them well cooked, this cooked, well cooked? I don't want a watery yolk. Cook it well. I just want my, you know, so that diet is simple and straight, you know, you're just eating something that's food, and that's it.
Can you tell people what ugali is?
So ugali, this is, you know, it's cornmeal, just corn flour, and you just boil water and just mix corn flour until you get a consistency that you want. But we want it like a little hard. And so it's kind of like, you know, a cornbread, but without like cooking oil, all the spices, whatever. It's just plain. It tastes like nothing. It tastes like ugali, I would say. And then you eat it, you serve it with like beef stew, cabbage, kale, or milk. And you know, where most of these runners come from, they use cultured milk. They call it mursik. So that is one of the secrets of long distance running. I hope I'm not giving out too much of their secret, but yeah, so there's the ugali, or the, you know, or the, you can, you know, chicken or beef stew. Some people even use beans to eat it with the ugali.
Right, exactly. So it kind of, it's almost like you have it as like, because you have it on your hands too, right? So it's sort of like you kind of dip it, and it's liquid and solid, kind of like liquidy solid sort of thing. But it's almost like using a roll kind of thing, where you're like absorbing the flavors of whatever else you have, right?
Yeah, to help the ugali taste delicious, or taste like something. You know, my kids, they go to school, they're like, oh, what did you have for dinner last night? They say ugali. They're like, Dad, nobody in our school knows what ugali is. Can you stop making ugali?
Exactly. But then their friends are probably excited about it. Now, the area where you grew up, though, I mean, you were doing this sort of training that you didn't know you were doing the training, but you probably had to know a little bit because you saw some of the other people from your region who were really good. I mean, even your aunt was the first African woman to hold the world record in the marathon and to win New York City. So
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's kind of a reality, I would imagine, that you think, hey, maybe the stuff that we were doing makes us actually fast. When did that realization come?
Actually, I would say that realization came when I came to America, like when I was already in America. Because back in Kenya, even though I was running, I did not run thinking I was going to pursue it past high school. The only reason I ran in high school was I was in a boarding school, boys boarding school. The only way you could get to go and hang around with like some girls and go to girls' school and meet your friends was through sports. So I said, oh, there's no way I'm missing this. So I started running. And then also to eat bread. We were given bread and milk, like the packed milk, as, you know, and that was big to go, you know, to get a full loaf of bread in high school. Oh man, like being in a school team. So then, and then I was good at it. It was nothing hard for me, but that was just to like have fun and like travel around the country, because, you know, I could go to like other places in Kenya for competitions. And then the teachers decided to do something really cool with, so all the distance guys would ride in girls' buses. So
What was that?
Oh, you know, we were riding with the girls, like, you know, when we drive, you know, they say, oh, you guys will go, because we had so many. So the rugby and whatever will use the boys' bus. And then these skinny guys, you know, you guys can go with girls to drive for like 10 hours, whatever. So it was a lot of, it gave me that like different environment to be able to like meet my friends from the village who went to girls' schools and all that. So it was kind of like, you know, it gave me that exposure of like, okay, how do you guys study this? How, you know, and remember, Kenya too, they, particularly where I come from, the emphasis of girl child was not, to go to school was not as, it was the same as boys. And even I remember going to church when I was in high school. It was something that we tried to push, telling our parents, hey, I think it would be good if all of us, regardless of our gender, go to school. And it was, for me, a kind of advocacy started when I was in high school for like, okay, we got to push the girls to go to school. But in order to do that, it was the understanding of what are they thinking though? What are the girls thinking about FGM, the female genital mutilation? Do they want to do that? What do they think about early pregnancies? And through running, I got to understand a lot of that because, like I said, we were told to ride in a bus with girls because, there's like a lot wrong, skinny girls, boys and girls, they fit with, I don't know how they came up with that, but that's what we did, which I really appreciate that happened. Like I did that because even what I'm doing now back home, I have a school back in Kenya that I started in 2012. And through what I learned from my friends in sports is what I am using to see how we can change the narrative about the female genital mutilation, which still happens today as we speak with you. It's still an issue in my village. Like nobody talks about it because nobody even knows what that is.
No, it's a huge issue, but these were the conversations that you were having on the bus as a high school student about, like,
Yes. Yeah,
really?
because we, like, there was so many of our friends that we were in school were like married off and all these things. But then when I saw the ones that got the opportunity to go to school, what they were doing, like they were doing the same things that the boys were, like even better. I remember even seeing a girl from my village who was playing volleyball and she could hit it so hard that I was like, watching them, I was like trying to hit that volleyball and I couldn't hit it as hard as she was. So there was that, like, look at what this mentality we are having back in the village that, they're girls. They can be in the kitchen, My mom would be like, no, don't worry about it. Like, they'll be fine. The boys can go to school. The girls can be women, they were not given the same opportunity as us boys.
Wow. So did you see running then as an opportunity to affect a greater change within Kenya for equality for women, for, eliminating some of these what traditional practices?
Yes, I did, because remember, like I was saying, the girl who was hitting volleyball, because remember, we've been told that, the role of girls in society was to do things that were not hard and tough. I even remember one time when I was in college in Kenya and my dad came and visited me, and she's like, he was telling me, you've got to listen to this. I said, what, Dad? It's like, the bus that was carrying like more than 50 people that I rode to the city? I say, what about it? He said, the driver was a woman. My dad was so surprised that a woman could drive a bus. But then I was like, Dad, but how did it feel like? Did you feel the difference when, like, because you've rode a bus that is driven by a man? He's like, yeah. I said, was there a difference? Like, no, but this was a tough lady, man. That was not an ordinary, like, lady. So I realized that if, the mental stuff, nobody would understand that. I had seen it, like, even when the girls would do good at school, it never made people go, maybe they are the same as boys. But the physical aspect would make them think twice, because some girls who used to play soccer with boys and like would just kick the boys, people actually saw those ones as strong and be like, wow, this is, but most of them were like that. Most of the girls were like that, but it was just because of how community perceived them. And it's still, even today, there's still a lot of push about that. And even the female genital mutilation, the school that I told you I started,
right.
There was a time my brother called me and said, hey, we have to look for a teacher. I said, why do we have to look for a teacher? And he told me one of the teachers that was teaching the school went and got circumcised. So we don't have it. What? Can you repeat that again? Someone who is graduated college. And yeah, so it's still happening even to the.
So this is a female teacher who went and had female circumcision.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's not because she wanted to do that. It was because of the stigma that she was facing among the women around there. She was always pushed like, oh no, You can't be with us. You've not gone through what the women, the rite of passage that some of us went through. So there's nothing we can discuss or talk with you. So she was just pushed all the time. And so she succumbed to pressure from community.
From the other women.
Yeah, from the women who, like older women. But through sports and education, I realized that because there are some parts of Kenya that don't do this. They don't practice what, is still being practiced in where I come from. That ability to travel to other parts of Kenya gave them that exposure.
They got to see something different. And that's what you're trying to do in your school?
Yes. And the thing that I'm trying to do is making sure that the girls themselves understand that, this is something that they can do without going through. This rite of passage is something that you don't need it to be a teacher or a nurse or a doctor or an athlete. You don't need to go through that. But it's an ideological fight that has to be gradual, because they're trying to go to school and they're still young. They can't fight with their parents, otherwise they will be regarded as disobedient kids, right? But and the government is stepping up now. It's illegal in Kenya, but it's still being practiced, in the rural parts where there is nobody to enforce. So the idea is to get those kids to understand that, hey, look, you don't need this to succeed in life. My sister, who is just 2 years younger than me, was circumcised just because, yeah.
Wow.
So, and then you're looking okay, well, so I even have my friends here in the US from the region that I come from, that, their siblings, the girls still go through the same rite of passage, because it's a big deal to fight it.
Now, so for you looking at it, going to the US, getting to run in the US, was that another step to be able to then have a bigger voice, have more power, be able to fund this school? Is this what you saw when you were going to the US, and how did that work, that you were a runner who then ended up in Alaska? Because Kenya to Alaska, those are some fairly different places.
I would say yes. The exposure that I got from, I went to college in Kenya prior to coming to America. That going even to college in Kenya, not even here yet, gave me a different exposure, sharing experiences from other people, other students from other parts of Kenya who did not prescribe to whatever we believed in my village at all. We were in our own circle of thought process that nobody else, like a ton of people, didn't even believe it. So that gave me that opportunity. Then I come to America, and then my horizons opened. When you are in Kenya, you look, it's like, okay, this is it. I have made it to the peak. Then I come to America, I was like, wow, I had not even seen half of what I thought I had seen. But then I thought about my own experience. How did I get to where I am? School and sports. So then I thought, what if I created a system that, even if it brings one person every 15 years or every whatever, I was just stretching it the minimal impact that could create over time. And I said, you know what? If I could even change one person or bring one person who can carry the beliefs that I have, and then we become 2, we become 3, we become 10. I share this story with my friends through a podcast, through my own stories. Then I get more word out there And maybe I get more people who would want to support me in this course of trying and gradually change what these people are thinking. Because it's not criminal. I can't blame them for what they believe, because there was a point, even when I was in Kenya, that I believed 90% of the things that we were being told, because I grew up being told this is what it is. So
who are you to challenge it? Right.
Yeah. But then looking back, there are some things I'm like, how did I even believe that? How did I even think that was like something that I needed to do? But then it's because of the exposure. It's because of the things that I have seen, I've experienced in life. So now I am a strong believer that if you give someone an opportunity to experience something good will come out of it.
Exactly. So you went to the US and your world was opened up. You had the chance to experience something good, but then you also had probably the worst thing that you could imagine happen when your cousin committed suicide. How did that change your worldview from this positive path to where you ended up in a really difficult position?
Prior to me losing my feet, I still had plans of doing the things that I wanted to do. But I was telling myself, let me finish school first, let me graduate, then I will do this after this. Then my cousin committed suicide. I plunged into major depression. I lose my feet. And then I survived.
Now the depression thing, hold on, can I talk? Because you are such an upbeat guy. Have you always been like this upbeat, like I see a problem and I can see a solution? Because when I was reading about you being depressed, I felt like you were the kind of guy who would, if you were depressed, you would be disappointed in yourself for being depressed. Where's that kind of conflict going on for you when you're in the midst of this depression?
Yes, and I think that is what, I think you put it, like, I had not thought about it that way. Like, you are disappointed that why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? And I think that is exactly what that is what I was struggling with. Because I'm always thinking, look, I was one of these guys that were like, oh, somebody is having a problem. Can we maybe rally behind and help and do this? And now I can't even help myself. I can't. But then the other thing was that, and this is, I'm seeing it's a global issue. Nobody really, a few people can talk about their mental struggle, like depression, be it a Kenyan, be it an American. But I felt like it, I was more reserved. And I didn't want to share most of the things that I was going through, because remember, I was here as a student athlete, an international. I was on a student visa. And, there are so many things that could go really wrong if you don't maintain your status as a student. So there was that part that I didn't want to expose my vulnerability. And maybe they would be like, well, we could maybe take you back home, then maybe you would feel better.
Right. Yeah.
So I was trying to hide that part to be able to maintain my eligibility and graduate, because that is what I came for. So there were so many things. But then when I finally, was stuck after going for a run, not really, wandering out, because major depression, and I was taking antidepressants, passed out for taking more than I should, trying to fix the issue that I was going through. I passed out. 56 hours later, I emerged, went to the hospital. And I remember one thing, a doctor asked me, how do you feel after I gained consciousness? Because I was on and off. They said it was around 3 a.m. in the morning. But I remember when I was able to talk and knew where I was, it was around like 2 p.m. All that time I don't remember anything.
Right.
But
The guy at the hotel said you came in and just said 911.
Yeah, I don't even remember that, but I don't even remember who I saw. Was it a man? I really don't even know. Now I feel like I know because I know the area when I went back after I was fully recovered. I feel like I know, but I really don't, because I was like, wow, okay, I ended up in this hotel. And then how did I end up in the hospital? It's like, how did they move me from the hotel to, I don't know, the ambulance or something, and then to the hospital? So I don't remember that part. But talking of after amputation, and I was sitting in my hospital bed. And before the amputation, I was saying, the doctor asked me, hey, Marko, how do you feel? I said, I feel good. The only problem that I have is my hands. My hands are so painful. Like I can't.
You had frostbite there too, right?
Yeah. So the doctor was like, man, this guy was crunching his teeth. Like, no, I don't like the idea that you're saying you cannot feel your feet, because pain is a sign of life. It tells you you're still living. And I've carried that even in my running. When I'm like, oh man, this is painful, I say, hey, remember, you're still alive. This is good. This is a good thing. So the amputation happened, and I'm sitting in my hospital bed or sleeping, thinking, how did I end up here? And you know, Chris, I think this was a good thing to me, because I was like at my lowest point, that I did not have anything to hide at that point and anything more to lose. So I said, you know what? And I was like, what are these guys gonna do with me? Ship me to Kenya like this? Like, I say, I can refuse and just sit down and be like, I'm not going to Kenya now. Look, I can't even walk. But I started thinking, you now have lost everything, including your feet and your American dream. There's no way you can get out of this. But what is the worst thing that can happen if you try and build yourself from this? What is, I think, nothing. I've already lost what brought me to America. I've lost my American dream. But, and if I could really prevent things from happening, like I was guilty of maybe preventing my cousin from committing suicide, wouldn't it have been my own self? Like, if I could prevent things, would I have prevented my feet from being amputated? And, you know, it's part of experience, learning experiences in life. I said, you know what? This has happened. So I told myself in the hospital bed, what I'm going to do today is I'm stopping taking my antidepressants. And, you know, I always say, Chris, I am not giving a medical advice. I am not a doctor. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a clinician in any form about mental health. So this is my own things I was telling myself. I say, I'm going to stop the antidepressants, and I'm just going to, because every time I told myself something good, I felt good. I said, man, and then I would sleep. Like, you know, I'm like telling myself good things, and then all of a sudden I don't even finish telling myself good things, and then I sleep. And then I wake up, I said, no, I am not going to tell myself anything bad, because remember, when I was telling myself something good, it was so pleasant that I fell asleep. And then through that process, I realized something, I learned something, that happiness is a skill. It's not innate. It's not something that be like, oh yeah, I want to be happy, without like actually practicing to be happy. I said, you know what? I am going to do this. Telling myself positive things. If I have like one negative thought, I will tell myself 1,000 positive things. And then I am having this fantasy, like telling myself this good thing. And I said, then I am going to, after I get out of the hospital, I want to be a motivational speaker. And prior to losing my feet, actually, you can go to my previous videos in college, where I was just this guy who would just speak. You know, public speaking was my thing. I was like, you know what? I know how to speak. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid speaking to a crowd. So I'm going to do that. Sharing my experiences, sharing how it feels to be depressed, and telling someone, hey, don't be like myself. Don't hide that, because look at what it did to me. Had I shared more of what I was afraid to share. Maybe that would have saved my feet. But then at the same time, though, I tell myself, but then what if having my feet would have made me think the way I thought before losing them? I said, maybe, no, I'm good now. Because what I can, the experience, the life experience that I have now, the passion, the things that I appreciate now are more than what I used when I used to have my feet. I don't even remember one time that I woke up one morning and say, God, thank you so much for providing me with 2 feet. But now, man, you can walk close to my prosthetic, Chris. I'll be like, no. Hey, don't step on them. I need those more than anything else. So then I self-talked myself and I started feeling better. The only part that I didn't feel better was the cold turkey on antidepressants. I was having all kinds of things going on in my head, but I held on to it. And I didn't even tell my doctors or my nurses that I was not taking my medicine, but I was keeping them. After like more than like maybe 15 days, I told them, you know what? I've not been taking my antidepressants. I don't want them. Here they are. I gave them back. And I stopped taking them. And then I also know now, even now, there are some times when I'm like really down, like things are not going, but then I know it's okay. I don't beat myself up that, oh man, I want to bang my head. Why am I feeling like this today? I embrace it. I was like, man, this is not fun. Today is not a good day, but you know what? It's what today has for me. So I embrace that too. I don't fight it. I fight it in a positive way. Like, okay, So now I know, even with feet, you can still be sad. And even without the feet, you can still be sad. So it's part of the process of life.
You're still human. You haven't changed in that respect. And your story, your story from Kenya to Alaska of having this dream of affecting the lives of the women the girls and women in your country, of coming to run in the US, of losing your cousin, of losing your feet and emerging from it, your voice is bigger as well. You said you told stories before, but your voice is bigger. Is that something that you have grown into after losing your feet?
Yes, I have, because my experience, I feel like I have gone through like a full circle of life. I'm like a cat now with 9 lives, So what I believe in a storytelling, see when you watch a movie and they say, this is a true story, look at the audience when they say this is a true story. People like pay attention because like, wow, like that movie Lone Survivor, is that the guy who survived
on the deserted island?
Yes.
Yep. Survivor. Yes. Yeah.
So for me, I know how impactful my story is because it's a true story. I don't have to sit down and write something to share. I went through it. I know how it feels. But then I know a lot of us have issues, challenges in life. The only difference between me and maybe someone else is mine are physical. Someone can be like, oh, no way, that guy is missing his feet. But we all have this, some kind of challenges. So my voice is grown bigger through what I have gone through and what I am able to do. Because I don't think we give ourselves credit sometimes. We get scared of, well, they will think I am bragging type deal. But then I look at myself, I say, you know what? I am not bragging about what I have done. I have done great things that I know a lot of people can do out there. They need to hear more and more of stories like myself of greatest comeback ever in life. And yes, you can too come out of the situation that you are in. It's not going to define who you are. And this is how I know, Chris, because I have been afraid, not afraid, but You know how, like, if you're not missing anything, you don't know how it feels not to have it. Like, I don't have my feet now, but the power inside me never diminished. I still have that heart of like wanting to do something big, even when I don't have a lot of big things in me, like my feet. So then I realized the power in us is not outside us, it's in us. So we just need to generate that and get out of ourselves, and it will excel us. It will propel us to greater heights. We don't give ourselves enough credit, and then we suppress our potentials.
Who in your family or in your village was the storyteller? I mean, did you kind of come to this on your own, or did you follow in the footsteps of someone else?
No, I did not follow into the footsteps of someone else. You know, growing up, I was this kid who would get in trouble all the time for questioning things. I was very curious at a young age. So at age 5, my mom donated me to my grandmother to go in. But my grandmother was not too far from my mom's house. It was just like a few blocks, like, you know, a few, like maybe 3 minutes walk to my grandma's house. But because my grandma didn't have someone young to stay with, and they said, hey, you go stay with my grandma. But my mom used to tell me, to warn me that, hey, this too much talking might not take you far. You need to do more and speak less. But I couldn't help. Like, before I know it, I have always said so many things that I'm in trouble already. We still have like chiefs and village elders, and there was like sometimes when kids were just playing, sitting down, and if like an elder, like an older person passes, we had to stand up for them. But then I didn't want to. I said, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to stop playing to let an adult go by? I've never seen an adult do that when we kids go somewhere. But, you know, that got me in a lot of trouble. I remember one time my dad was called to school because I questioned that. Because I felt like it was some kind of suppression, like oppression of some sort. Like, that is how I, as a young kid, I said, why do they tell us to stand up? Like, kids are having fun, and then all of a sudden, we have to stop playing our mini soccer games. Like, we were not even on their way. They had a way. So it's those little things. And then I saw, you know, the way the women and girls were treated, and then like something inside me was like, man, we have to do something. But I didn't have the power to like do something. I didn't know how to do it without getting in trouble. So then that is when I was like, let me learn from like these people. Are they really going through what I think they're going through? Or maybe this is like my own head. So I was like my own storyteller. And then when I was in high school, I participated in drama and music festivals and like comedy and all that. So it was something that was in me. I couldn't help to not be myself.
You're a guy who just has to open your mouth and talk.
Yeah, and talk, and well, get in trouble like with my mom, but like I never got in trouble like in school or whatever. Like, it was just when we were like on a social gathering, then yeah, I talked.
Do you talk when you run?
No, I don't talk but I do a lot of planning. I plan when I'm training. I'm like running my head like, okay, this is what I want. And I'm thinking about like how I want to change the world, and how I want to build my school in Kenya, and how I want to get a sister school in America so that the kids in Kenya can get an opportunity to share ideas with their friends in Africa, and all things like that. I like always thinking about, okay, how do we plant more trees in my village, because so many trees have been cut, and like things like that. Like, just doing small things to just change a society.
What's next for you, Marko?
Next is to break a sub 2:30 in marathon and build modern classrooms in my school in Kenya.
And what's the time frame on that, building the modern classrooms in Kenya, and on the 238 marathon, or the to do 238 or 235? What did you say?
2:30.
2:30. Oh, just
Yeah.
2:30. Okay, so that's significant. So that's
It is
almost
a big,
6 minutes
it's
faster than you've gone.
it's a very tall order, but I think I can do it. And I'm trying to do those this year. The school, it's been 10 years since I started that school. And I have a few friends that, I've reached out to that are joining with me. And if someone listening to us talk wants to follow me on my journey on building modern classrooms, they can go to markocheseto.com. That's my website, just my name, markocheseto.com, and see what we can do. And then for breaking at 2:30, man, I have to do that by myself, I guess, like training by, I know the school, I can rally friends and we can do it. On the running part, I have to like grind until when I am running, and then I have those spectators and they will push me to a 2:30.
Are the two connected in your mind? Is there a way that running a sub 2:30 marathon helps you to build the modern classrooms?
Yes, because I know all these are very tall orders. Like these are big things, but a marathon is not a small thing. Every step I make tells me start small. Just have the idea, go small, but be consistent. Do it over and over and over, and talk about your school and running over and over and over. And before you know it, you will be able to do it. And the other thing too, Chris, that I really, and I'm going to do this, it's going to happen, is, the school in Kenya, I'll go around, partner with some few schools here in the US. There's a school in particular here in Florida. I'm not talking about what the school yet. I'm still hunting for the director of the school, so that we can ask parents, kind of like an exchange program, send some kids from America to my village for a week or maybe or a month. They'll have to wash their own clothes. They have to go to the river to fetch their water, and they have to go to school and then run, and then we bring them to America and then see what they think. And I know they will enjoy it, because I took my kids who were born in America to Kenya in 2020. And guess what? When it was time to come back to America, they didn't want to come back. They're like, no, we are not going to America. We don't want you following us all the time. Hey, girl, don't go here. Don't do this. Because they were just in the village and doing their own thing. They enjoyed that freedom. And they're like, no, it's way too cool to be around grandma too. So maybe it was a grandma that it was, but they loved all the above.
That is awesome. Well, we will look forward. You're going to have to tell us, about the 2:30 marathon and about the modern school as well, Marko. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great story, and I'm sure you've created a lot of amazing fans out there too.
I hope I have.
I'm sure you have. And for all of you, I hope that you are fans of Marko. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. Please, if you liked what you heard, tell your friends, tell them to tune in. We'd like to get these stories to more and more people out there. This will be a traditional podcast, so you will be able to find it on Spotify, Apple, all the places that you find your regular podcasts. It also will be on the One Revolution page. It'll be archived there. So if you want to go back and see it in its entirety, you can do exactly that. Please tune in next week. Thank you, Marko, and thank you all of you for tuning in.